Thank you. Thank you. Well, in addition to hosting the Kris Kobach Show, some of you may know that I have a day job as a law professor at UMKC, where I teach constitutional law. And I was asked to say a few words in defense of our Constitution today, so I thought I'd do that. You know, one of the first things I teach my constitutional law classes on the first day of class is I ask them, what is the Constitution? What does the Constitution do, and what was so special about America? Now, some students are taught in high school America was the first democracy. That's not true. Some are taught America was the first republic. That's not true either. America was the first constitutional republic enforced by written rules to keep the government in place and in the right size. The Constitution is a cage around the beast, and the beast is government. And what we are here to do today is to put the beast back in the cage. You know, when the Founding Fathers gathered between May and September of 1787 in Philadelphia to draft that great document, it was not a done deal. It was not at all clear that this thing was going to pass and be ratified by the states. And so they had to argue for it. And James Madison and Alexander Hamilton and John Jay wrote the famous Federalist Papers. And the Federalist Papers are basically a bunch of editorials, op-eds, trying to persuade their fellow Americans that this is a good Constitution. And one of the arguments against it was that the itty-bitty federal government in the Constitution was even too big. Even that was too much. And James Madison, in Federalist 45 in 1788, he said these words. He said, "Don't worry." This is what he said, quote, "The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. The powers reserved to the several states will extend to all the objects when the ordinary course of affairs concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people." End quote. Does that sound like the government we have today? No. He came up with a very clear concept of enumerated powers. There's a list in Article 1, Section 8. And if Congress doesn't find that power in that list, you don't have it. It's not there. And as for the redistribution of wealth, the framers certainly would have had none of that. Thomas Jefferson said this. He said, quote, "The democracy will cease to exist when you take away from those who are willing to work and give it to those who would not." End quote. A turning point in American history. Will the American people recognize that we are at that turning point? Or will they continue watching TV and pass the popcorn? Well, I'm here to say we know what's going on, and we are going to stand up and fight for our Constitution. Abraham Lincoln, 3 decades later, said America is a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and that has largely been true in our history. If you look at, just the other day, I was looking at the greatest acts of Congress, the biggest acts of Congress over the last 120 years. The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, the first time the commerce power was exercised in a big way. The Social Security Act of 1935, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. All 3 of those major acts had broad bipartisan support. Huge support from both parties. Sherman Antitrust Act was unanimous in the Congress. Absolutely broad support of all 3. But now look at Obamacare. Not a single vote from the minority party for Obamacare. 58% of Americans opposed to it. Is that government of, by, and for the people? This does not happen in a properly functioning republic. In a properly functioning republic, the will of the people is represented. You know, at the end of the Constitutional Convention, in a famous conversation, Benjamin Franklin was accosted by a lady, and she said, "Mr. Franklin, what type of government are you drafting in this document?" And Franklin replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." Well, Barack Obama has stolen our republic, and we want it back. And contrary to what the president may believe, the Constitution does not belong to the President of the United States. Nor does the Constitution belong to 5 of the 9 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. The Constitution belongs to we, the people. We, the people, love our Constitution. We the people will stand up for our Constitution. And we the people will fight for our Constitution. And this year, we are going to take it back. Thank you very much.